That first day I sat in the car and I burst out crying.
Rabbi Benjy Rickman lost his 15-year-old son, Naftali.
After just being hospitalised non-stop from them, passed away.
This podcast was really emotional.
And it was just...
So, let's get right into it. Enjoy the podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is Rabbi Benjy Rickman, for some people. Why did you want to come on?
So my whole life turned on its head almost 3 years ago today. Just in a couple of days we'll hit the 3-year anniversary when my otherwise healthy, strapping 15-year-old son, who I used to call my bodyguard, because pretty much from the age of about 7, 8, he was always by my side. Then he grew, he was bigger than me, taller than me, took ill, and about 2.5 months later, after just being hospitalised non-stop from them, passed away. And I just think it's important to demystify grief, demystify death. We need to talk about certain topics and not hide from them. And also perhaps to try and explain how living with pain or difficulties doesn't mean that you can't also smile and you can't learn to do both. So I think it's important just to talk through some of these issues and just make it more normal to talk, number one, to air that people struggle, but it doesn't mean that you have to hide away. And that the grief is reasonable, emotions are reasonable, and you can also live at the same time.
What do you mean about demystify grief?
People get very nervous to talk about it. We don't want to talk about someone who dies. We shelter our children from it, although it's quite ironic that the minute you start having any type of religious Jewish studies, you read the Torah, people are dying every week. Adam and Eve get bumped off, and then Noah dies, and then Abraham dies, and we shelter our children from certain topics, and there's violence and death, plenty in the Torah, but it's not really personalized. And cemeteries are sometimes considered to be off-limit places for children if their parents are still alive, or for women in some communities are not expected to attend a funeral. And I just think it's part of living. It's a fact. People live, people die. We want to imagine that people are going to live long lives, and then only old people, having lived a noble life and a worthwhile life, will leave us. But it's not true. And I joined a Facebook group soon after our son passed away. It's a depressing one. It's kind of thousands of members of parents who have lost children. So it's not one that I wish anyone to have to join. But it just shows you how much pain and how much grief from parents to children. You don't expect. Life is. You mourn those who are older than you, not those who are younger than you. And I think people are scared. People are scared. They don't know. They didn't know initially how to approach us. They would see us, my family, my wife and I, and they would sometimes cross the road, not knowing what to say. And it's okay to say nothing. It really is. It's okay. But then we had other people, dear friends, who would turn up every single Friday before Shabbat with something for our family. Not that we needed help with our cooking or the kids needed sweets, but just to say, I love you and I'm here this week as well. And yes, it was a bit sometimes to be like, should we say maybe stop? Because we don't, thank God we don't need, but it wasn't about that. It was about allowing someone to say, I'm going to tell you that I love you and I'm here for you. And I don't need to have some deep conversation about death and mourning or the soul and anything on that level. It was just simply friendship. I think people sometimes feel that they have to say something or do something very complicated, but it's not the case. And if you're in a situation to offer help, then something very simple, bag of popcorn, something little just brings that smile and just lifts the family a little bit. Just for
I presume everyone feels like they need to talk about a particular subject.
Some want to. Yeah. Some talk about it because they want the gossip. They want to know all the details and all the misery and all the because they have that need. That's fine. I mean, they didn't get it, but they might have wanted it. Others talk about it because they feel they have something wise to say. But during the week of Shiva, my daughter and I, and one of my daughters, my son who passed away was a twin, so this daughter's the twin sister. Someone very beautiful brought us a blanket because just to put over our laps because you do get chilly and doors opening, and we had a signal that when someone said something dumb, we just squeeze each other's hands. And I said to her, don't get cross. They're trying. Just sort of, in your heart, just do a little prayer that they should finish quickly, or just that you feel sorry for them that they have nothing else to say. But not to judge. People don't know how to do this. It's not. They're no manuals.
Yeah.
I just 45 minutes ago spoke in a shiver house, and I just wanted to impress upon. Again, it was a tragedy, not with a child, but someone who not very old, passed away in tragic circumstances. And I just said, allow yourselves to heal at a pace that's normal and natural.
Yeah.
Not to think that you've got to go by some sort of book. The rituals are there. Judaism is very smart in terms of rituals. And I think it's very useful as a ritual to deal with grief immediately. Not to put it off, because it's not going anywhere. So to deal with it, however hard it was, each morning waking up was, for lack of a better word, and excuse the language, hell on earth. To wake up to the reality, not that I slept so well the night, but it was a few hours of the brain wasn't focused, and to wake up having to, it's awful to re-engage with what had happened. I just said, the rituals are there, but no one can dictate to you how you're going to feel at any moment. And those stages of grief that psychologists talk about are in place, but you could go through all 4 and then start again, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just to sort of just have that, air it in, because there's a lot of topics we don't like to talk about. I think this is one of them, just to make it part of our conversation. Not that you can necessarily give anyone all the answers, and you're not going to give people all the knowledge that they need, and you're not necessarily going to have the ability to cope yourself if you've had that conversation.
Yeah.
But just to make it part of living.
I remember going to a speech around 4 or 5 months ago where you were talking to a crowd about your son, about Naftali. And you were saying for the first month after he died, it was just you didn't leave the house.
So went to shul and came back.
Yeah.
Didn't go back to work. It was part of our journey. The fact that I teach teenagers.
Yeah.
I've been doing it now for over 20 years, and I didn't feel ready. Yes, I wasn't ready to go back and see other 15-year-old boys. It wasn't. There's no jealousy, God forbid, that why they are alive and my son's not. But it was just, I don't have that. I don't have. You have to, in order to teach, you have to be able to love your students and to deeply care about them as individuals, to really care about their lives, because they need to know that someone's there. And if I can do that role as a teacher, then I think I've done something worthwhile. And I didn't have the capacity to love, because the gap inside of me was so deep, so profound, that I was empty. And so it was until after it worked out well on the calendar that it was November, and then winter exams, and then the holiday. So it almost naturally gave us that time. But yeah, there was no capacity. There were some things were off limits. It just, did not have the capacity to be in a classroom with other people and to give them what you need to give.
What happened when you did go back? Because obviously teenagers, I presume, aren't always the most easy to talk about in this.
No, okay, so I haven't told many people this. I drove through the gate on that first day back after the winter holiday, took a deep breath, and I must tell you, every day when I go into school, doesn't matter how I feel, the smile comes on, the lights come on in my brain. No one needs to be miserable because I'm feeling. On those times when you've got a bad headache or you've had a duff, whatever, at home, the kids know. They go, "Sir, what's wrong?" And it's not for me to make their lives miserable. Now, I'm there to be there for them. So put the smile on and you do your job, and then we take whatever you got, you take it home with you. That first day I sat in the car and I burst out crying. And I didn't know if I was going to be able to get out of the car. Like, do I have the capacity to do the knowledge? Obviously, is in my head. That didn't go anywhere. Do I have the capacity, the drama, the noise, and cried? Crying's amazing, by the way. If you don't know how good crying is, try it sometime. It's good. You got to cry. It cleanses you. It resets everything in a way that nothing else does, and it doesn't damage you. Like, God forbid, people take substances to reset. That causes a long-term damage. Here, you just cry. Your eyes are red. You wipe away the tears, and it just resets everything in a way that's just so cleansing. I thought, I'm going to do this now, and I got out the car, took a deep breath, and the wave of love. You talk about the wave of grief that knocks you off your feet in these situations, but the wave of love, and that beautiful Jewish phrase, "Wish you a long life." If God took all of those wishes into account, I'm living forever. there'll be no one on the planet living as long as me, because 800 kids wishing you a long life. But it was, and colleagues came over to me, Jewish and non-Jewish colleagues, and they too just wanted to, they didn't, but they wanted to envelop you in a hug, say, it's nice to have you back. It's nice you're back with us. I know what happened. And they visited me during Shiva. So they'd been to my house, they'd seen me. And at the end of that 7 days, the mirrors are covered. I hadn't looked at myself in the mirror. And part of the process was that my son was growing up and he was looking more and more like his father. So I could see him and me, and it was uncomfortable seeing myself, seeing him in the mirror. So thank God the mirrors were closed. And I saw myself after those 7 days, and I'd barely eaten anything for 7 days. I just wasn't hungry. And people would think our home was so full that I didn't have a chance to eat, and I didn't want to eat. And I looked shocking. And they'd see me, I was thin, miracle, thin, and just looked like I was grey, and just awful. But I came back, smile, look back to teaching, and thank God, and I taught. And I can say that there's something special about our family. We just did what we felt was the right thing to do always. And although it might have been tempting sometimes to go back to bed, get up, go to shul, do that thing, go daven, then, goodbye world, we never did it.
You said you looked grey and probably disgusting and whatever. Did you feel the same inside, or was it just,
Yeah, it was... I've recently been able to express it in terms of, we don't really know our capacity to love someone. We don't really get it because we take everyone for granted, because they'll be there in the morning, they'll be there in the afternoon. And part of the grief, the whole thing's full of grief, but part of the pain was that I'd gone back to school the day before he passed away, thinking, improvements, the doctor seemed a bit happy, and I was in school hours before, saying to people, thank God, things are looking okay. And I got in from school around maybe 4 o'clock, get a phone call, my wife said, he's not looking good now, come back to the hospital. Remember the taxi journey there, the heart's racing, and every car's like, just get out of my way. I said to the driver, just dump me at the children's hospital, just dump me at this end on St Mary's, and I'll run through all those buildings to get there. We'd lived in the hostel for 2.5 months. I literally felt the hostel was my house. I'd walked on every staircase, every part of the building. We'd walked with him, pushed him when he would to get out of the ward in a wheelchair, just to get him around the hospital. And I ran through and I tripped, I stumbled. I caught myself and got there, and a few hours later, it was the end. So it was... it's mysteries. Just everything was a mystery. The doctors left us to go down to intensive care. We'd been in intensive care on Rosh Hashanah 2 months earlier, or whatever it was, 6 weeks earlier, and it had just been, we were there. And the boy next to him had been in intensive care with an infection, and we just thought, okay, you'll go get some medicine. There was no warning.
I'm just going to quickly interrupt to remind you to subscribe to our channel to see more content like this. Anyway, back to the video.
At one point, the faces of the nurses who were there, and we thought, Baruch Hashem, thank God, the nurse was with us the first time, was back on duty. We felt comfortable. We'd been there before, ghastly place. Nobody wants to go there, but we felt at least comfortable knowing we'd seen the space. We knew the nurse had been okay last time, and then at one point, you don't want to accept it. So your brain's it protects you because you don't want to go there. Her face, thinking back now, her face changed, and she got very serious. And I think at one point she knew that this wasn't going to end well. And then the doctor said, "Okay, everyone stop." And this is amazing. If people take this away in terms of just how to live as a person, you got the doctor, the consultants standing at the bed. It was like a team of 12. I can't remember how many were there. He goes, "Look, okay, everyone just stop. I've tried this. What do you think? What do you think?" He went round the table, asking from the other doctors to the nurses to whoever was there, what can we do? And they were fighting and fighting. It wasn't to be in the middle of the night. And it was just... What's real about grief, though, is that, and I'm trying to stop it now because it's very close, the line between, almost these thin lines on your table here, like thinner than the grain of wood on the table, is back in that space. Flashbacks, images, sounds, as if it happened literally a second ago, and you're there. And the other side of that very, very thin line is the educator, the father, the husband, the son, the assistant rabbi in his shul, being there for other people in their situations. Please God, wedding later, a shiva house earlier. Being there for others in their cycles and to function in that space. And my family and I have decided, to the best of our abilities, God willing, choose life, sanctify life, make living a value. Don't be on the other side of that line. And it's very easy to be there. I don't know if I could be there in terms of the way I was brought up and what I want to do, but it's always, for me, it's always there. It's always a second and you'll be back in that building. But then Hashem took us. God took us back to the hospital. And one of my children needed a routine outpatient, and that's a building I didn't ever want to go back into. Didn't want to go back ever. I can see I can see the whole building. It doesn't, like, literally, it's there. It's like, I can almost know those glasses that project an image. I can see it. But we had to go back. When we were sitting there, I looked up and I saw one of the wards we were on. It was a teenage ward where there also Nebuch teenage cancer patients, and there was a lady there who's employed to give them happy times. Tell you a funny anecdote. So one night she came around saying, Wednesday night we're having dominoes. So, Baruch Hashem, kosher ham, Jewish family. My son's thinking, the game dominoes, we'll play dominoes. Hadn't realised that it was pizza. But this lady came around, she had brought him cans of Coke or crisps that were kosher or whatever. So I saw her walk past, and because everything had happened so fast, we were there, and we were there for ages, so everyone knew who we were. Then we were gone, and there was no time to thank the staff who had participated in giving him, pleasant, happy times when he was in hospital. I said to my wife, I've got to go and have this talk. I've got to go up to her. So I dashed out, and I saw she was going to get coffee, and I know the coffee place in the children's hospitals, the ground floor at the end. And I went up to her, and I said, do you remember me? And she said, oh my gosh, Naphtali's father. Now, it's not about a kid. I'm talking about my son. He never thought about himself or anything. He didn't know things we heard he did, looking after his friends and being so. He never told us the most amazing things that he did and how he supported people. And people afterwards wrote letters, and young boys, so know how he looked after their lives and how he gave them their dignity, and people who were really struggling. And he never came up and said, "Oh, Dad, today, I was there." And people knew him. The whole hospital knew him. It was amazing. And she spoke. So there's the grief, there's the pain, there's the desire to make my life and the lives of other people pleasant and to give to others. That's what we saw, and that's what we do. But there's also motivated by a sense of tremendous pride in what he did. And then there's this random nurse or admin staff. We went in this outpatient that said to them, "No, is the consultant who we had, is she working today in her unit?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Can I see her?" "No, she's got patients for hours." I said, "Fine." I just want to say, she looked after my son who passed away here. And I mentioned his name, and this random person who I didn't even know, and people knew him, and so it fills me with a tremendous sense of mission. Like, he touched the lives of so many people without even knowing it, and times that he knew that he was doing things that were good. And that's what people miss. They miss that gem, that angel amongst people that went around and changed people's lives. So that's what people miss about him. They didn't miss the suit he wore or the watch he had or any of that stuff that we know isn't really true about anybody. They missed him. So we're trying to channel the gift that he had in the world, his soul, his way of looking at things, to be there for others and to bring that into the world, because that's what's left from the world. His clothes are in the cupboard in our house. The suit we went to buy for his first week of lower six, that he wore for I think less than a week before he took ill. That's in the cupboard. No one's missing that. They're missing the person. So we try to. No, what would he have done? We say. No, what would he have? What would he have dug deep? Would he have been there? Would he have gone over? No, and to try and bring his essence into the world, because for those who knew him, that was very, 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 very precious about him, and what people loved about him. So we're trying to take that on. It's not an easy task.
I remember I was in school with Naftali, and I talked to him quite a bit. I remember when after he died, there was this people. Actually, I got asked myself if I wanted to write a letter, but I heard that people are writing letters. When you receive this, like you said, boys writing letters of their personal experiences to Naftali. The boys, I presume, you don't usually open up. I presume they opened up in there.
Oh my gosh! So the boys. This maybe goes back to that first question. Why am I doing this? The boys had teenage boys had no context for this thing. When I was in school, a classmate of mine in the first year, his father passed away. Remember, we had to go to the Shiva house. We were 11 years old. We had no clue what we were doing. The boys came, and they sat. Some spoke, some just sat, and I think some of them just wanted to sit, be with us, because we were the link to Naftali, just to be there. And those letters were some of, you said, boys don't write their emotions. Some do, but not known to be poets and to express deep emotional content. And they did, and they wrote. And we didn't know many of the anecdotes that they shared. Some of them I've used as inspiration for the articles that I write for the Jewish Tribune newspaper on the anniversary, and there's, please God, one will go in the paper this Wednesday coming, just the week before the Yortzeit. Just worked out that my slot was coming up this week, but I wrote, this time I actually didn't take from the boys, I went through my phone and we bought, when he was in hospital, we bought him a phone so he could, in his school's not allowed a phone, but in hospital we got him a phone so he could keep in touch with my siblings in Israel, and they could give him, when we went around and get chizuk, be supported, be nurtured. And I'd look back at some of his text messages, which was, I have to wonder sometimes why do I put myself in this, but I thought, again, there's a purpose. I can take something from it and hopefully help other people. And I read some of those messages, but for this year, and I wrote about some of the themes that were in those messages. But previously, I wrote about, I used a message that someone actually found me, a boy who wasn't in his class, a boy who found me on Instagram, and then shared something very, very beautiful, how he was fragile, but Naftali would come every day and stand next to him in the playground, and how it really, it transformed his school experience. It's Naftali, his name was Naftali Meir. And in Jews, we put a lot of emphasis on certain spiritual concepts, and a name is meant to mean something. So Naftali could mean struggle, which ironically for him proved to be accurate in some parts of his life. When he was a baby, when he was 3 months, he was very, very sick with meningitis, and almost lost him when he was a baby. And who knows if all the prayers gave him almost an extension of just over almost 15 and a half years. So he struggled then. But also means to pray. Different interpretations, different perspectives. When he was a baby, for sure, he was very, very sick, and the whole world prayed, from Australia to America and everything in between. Garnered a lot of holy people and regular people. Everyone's holy, but the rebels and the righteous people from different groups got their prayers, and thank God we took him home. And I spoke at the meal we made when he came home as a baby, mentioned those 2 points, and then educationally with his dyslexia again. And one of the things boys said, in the letter was, he owned it. And this is also makes me so proud. He owned his struggle. He didn't hide it. He took control of it. This is who I am. Deal with it. No, he had a brain, so he could come up with the logic and explain things deeply. And a friend would read the Chumash, read the Gemara, read whatever the text. Essays were an absolute nightmare. Sunday afternoon, he knew his friends scribbled their work for English in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, and they were done. 4 hours he could spend trying to get this dyslexic brain to take the thoughts in his brain and get it on paper, and that's the struggle. And boys knew, and he owned it. That's what boys spoke about. They were in awe of how he could not hide and not feel belittled by it, but to rise up to the challenge that his life presented to him, and say, okay, I'm going to deal with this. I'm not going to pretend it's not real. It's real. And that's so much of that was what they appreciated about him. And the Meir. So what's Meir? Meir means to illuminate. He hated the second name. Most people don't like the second names. Unless you're called always double-barreled name, it's not a name you don't associate it with you. But ironically, the way I said to you before, the whole hospital knew him. The consultant, the non-Jewish consultant, happened to be also, we had a Jewish almost consultant who was qualifying as a consultant as well, which was another bracha we had. And the hospital staff and the occupational therapist, they came to our home during Shiva. When I looked up, my colleagues came that night, and I looked up and I said, I'm so sorry that I can't speak to you now, but the team from the hospital are in my house. That doesn't happen. Hospital staff don't visit. But he would probably be embarrassed and sort of, God, about what you're talking about. But he illuminated this mayor, this ability to illuminate the lives of other people and to speak up and to touch people in such a profound way, brought these people to my home. And they wrote, and they sent us flowers. And they sent cards, the hospital staff, and the ward nurses sent, we don't realise where our journey is going, who touches us in that way. And there's also the boys from school, they wrote these letters and we've put them away. We generally take out the file. See, this is where also you've got to be sensible. You can live in misery. You can choose just to be a victim out of circumstances and live in that awful place and obsess about the letters and look at his phone and listen to the voice and never do anything with your life. You're just stuck there, and it's really not healthy. Or you can accept that your life, and I compared it to walking with having a stone in your shoe. Have a stone in your shoe, the first few moments, it hurts. So most people would stop walking, take their shoe off and bang the shoe and get the stone out. But what if you can't get the stone out? What if it's always there? So it's going to hurt at first. But eventually there'll be a dent in your foot where the stone goes. And now it no longer hurts. Or it hurts, but that just becomes the way you live your life. Another person couldn't walk 10 seconds in your shoes, because for them it would be so sensitive. And that's where we're living. So when do you take it out? Tisha B'Av.
Once a year?
Once a year, Tisha B'Av. Coming from shul, sitting on the floor anyway, take out the box, we read some of the cards, we look at his phone. But I backed up the message onto to make sure it's always there, onto Google, the WhatsApp messages, and we look at it, and that's a day for grief. But the desire is there more often than once a year. But I just don't. It's not sensible. And if you're hearing the echo of he lived, and if you accept the spirituality of our teachings, that he finished his job, he was refined. I say to people, I felt like he lived decades in the weeks he had. He could have left the world Rosh Hashanah. When I was called off the bimah in shul, I was leading the services on Rosh Hashanah, and they said, come now. I'd literally finished the repetition of the Amidah, and I was said, go now to hospital. And someone in shul is traumatized still by the words that came out with us, is he alive or is he die? I just said that was my first reaction. Because the additional pain was that we were expecting him to come home on that day for a few hours to visit us. Instead of coming to our home, he was rushed into intensive care. So again, the extremes of I was excited to see my child in our home. He hadn't been home. To my Rosh Hashanah was now forget chauffeur, forget everything. I'm going in a car from the bimah to a hospital to my son, who I thought I was losing him in those moments. And thank God he lived for all those weeks. In between those weeks, I feel like he grew decades in what he achieved in himself, how other people were inspired by him. And so people live 80 plus years and they do nothing. I've been at funerals where they stand there, or when you want to give a eulogy, that they're saying things that I want. One in particular, I can't remember who it was, but it's in my head. It's like, they said nothing. Oh, you got grandpa's temper. You grabbed the remote control like grandpa. Nothing. Like, this person lived and like wasn't philanthropist. Wasn't charitable. Just stupid things they spoke about. And I have the privilege, and I say that, with humility, to be able to say things about a child who was 15 years old. He would never say any of these things about himself, but enough things that you could think that's what a person's life of 80 plus years would be. And at some level, he was living on a different frequency in those. And I see it as the kindness of God who gave us those weeks with him in order to get to know him, to spend that time. And he didn't know that he was not going to make it. Yeah, and he did make one comment when he wasn't right at the end, when he was in pain. He said something. I don't know if he knew, or it was just an expression of discomfort. the last thing we said to him, and I can take them. This is also so. The last thing I said to my dad, before he was no longer able to communicate, when he got sick 6 years ago, so he said to me, he said, "Benjy, I love you," and I hold that so deep to my heart that he said that to me. Tragically, they're the last words he said to my child. Said to Naftali. They put him in a coma at the end just to calm the body down. We didn't know that would be the end. We just thought they put him in the coma, they'll bring him out of the coma, we'll be okay. And my wife and I said, we leant over, we kissed him. Naftali, we love you. And they were the last words that he would have heard. And that also means that's I don't want to use the word comfort because I don't mean it as a comfort. It's a relief. It's beautiful. It's pain that sort of my dad to me to my child, or whatever that really needs to mean. But words matter, and he left this world hearing those words. So he was at peace when he went to sleep that final time.
It sort of sounds like you learn a lot about him and a lot about how he was and how he acted after he died and after all his friends sent in letters. Do you wish that you could have maybe known him more or spent more time with him?
He was always by my side. It wasn't that we didn't know our child, because wherever I went, and part of the comments people said to me, and part of the pain was he was literally always by my side. We were a team, and people saw that, and people said you were always together, and that was part. People who visited us were broken because they knew how often we were together. As a teenage boy, did he communicate his heroic deeds? Did he communicate that inner world? No, but I believe that was so much part of him, that he was such a humble and modest, and sort of, he did what he did, but for him it wasn't impressive. That's just what you do. It wasn't like, I've got a cape and I'm going out to save someone in school today. Like, well, obviously, if someone's looking miserable, you go and help them, because that's just what... whether that's the education we gave him intentionally or saw in our home, I can't comment, but for him it was just normal, and that sort of makes me love even more. It's not like, maybe if we would have had those conversations, it would have been less sublime, less beautiful, that he did those things, that his secret would have been revealed. And it's part of the pride we have in what he did in this world, that he was able to be that shining light, that for a boy who thought so little of himself, literally, and felt he struggled and he couldn't achieve, he achieved insanely. Now, I remember that when he got his GCSE results back just those few weeks earlier, before visiting my in-laws, his grandparents in America, and having an amazing summer holiday. The disappointment. I mean, Baruch Hashem, he did just great. There was nothing wrong with his results, but he felt that he had not done as well as maybe he wanted to. But he was achieving other things. That for some people, that's what it's about. It's not that the academic is one side of life, and there are people in the world who can do that, and they should just go and transform the world academically and use their abilities to do worthwhile things. But there's a whole other things in life, and he was definitely, as a teacher, he was definitely a star to level 9, to use those silly words from the world of schools, as a human being, and to that I'm proud. So, but that brings the pain back, because then you think, the one thing we don't ask, you're asking questions, we don't ask why. There's no the why, the theology. There's no value in the why, because you're never going to get an answer that makes sense. You can accept he'd finished his purpose in here, but the question, why did we have to have that child who, we're just an ordinary family? Why did we need to live with that? His twin sister to live with it, his older sister, not to have her brother at her wedding, and to have to, every happy time is tinged with. But you can do it. Parents can do it. Families can do it. You can dig deep, and you can say, we had a wedding, Baruch Hashem. We made the mitzvah. We've had happy times, and you can turn off. You can say, I'm going to dedicate this simcha, this happy time, to the child who deserves parents who are happy. And for my daughter's wedding, my wife and I promised each other, this is a wedding. This is not about who is not there. This is about a wedding of our child, our oldest child, married a gorgeous young man. We're going to be happy, and it was, Baruch Hashem. a happy wedding. So we were shattered for weeks afterwards because the control of the emotions is incredible, but it can be done.
Did you rethink the whole life really after, like the weeks after Naftali died?
Rethink his life.
Your life, like got the purpose or just everything really?
I don't think in those weeks following there was too much thinking. I think there was almost like survival mode. You had to get up because Shiva had finished. Had to go to shul. One of the better pieces of advice that I was given by a dear rabbi, local rabbi, who happened to have a very close relationship with my son. He said to me, you don't, both in terms of Jewish law, but also sorts of emotional common sense, you don't need to say Kaddish for a whole year. And I didn't. I stopped after the month. And that was probably one of the better things I did, because for a parent, you have to do it. It was meaningful. I felt it gave me the connection on some spiritual level to my father. And actually at the end of the year, when you stop saying it after 11 months, I felt bereft again and sort of almost, not exactly, but back to square one, because that connection had gone again through, But for my son, I didn't do it, and it helped, because the gut-wrenching pain of saying it and that feeling, and when you walk into shul on that Friday night, when you've lost, my father wasn't so old, but let's say a person loses a parent, late 80s, 90s, it's sad for them, sad for the family, cycle of life. Parent dies, my father in his 70s, not so old, it's hard. But for a child, almost nobody in the room could look at me, because they were so broken as well. And that sense of this is pure grief, it's just gut-wrenching misery was made more challenging through having to lead the services, to say Kaddish. It was more complex. So that was, I think, self-healing started to come into it, but with no expectations of how that process would go. You have to also have the ability to say, this book that they're all recommending is good for the recycling bin, but it's not good to be reading. It might work for some people, but it's not. And to close it, and not to feel you've got to, and just to be there. We were there for each other in those early weeks. We got up. We went shopping, food, had to eat, because there's no point starving yourself silly to that you're sick. And we just tried to live the days that in a new state. There were things we did immediately. The first thing we did was dismantle the bunk beds in his bedroom.
So you don't want to look
at it? We could, yeah. We couldn't go back, and he shared with one of his brothers. The bunk bed had to go. We had to create a physically different. We had to do it.
What
for
about the
ourselves.
rest of his possessions?
So yeah, those cupboards don't get opened very often, so they're still there. We haven't cleared out his stuff yet. Just now, 3 years later, some of his clothes that were smaller sizes, nothing he wore at that stage in life, and some of the clothes that you pass down from one child to the next are in good condition. His younger brothers now are beginning to wear some of those with pride. His twin sister took his hoodie straight away, and that was just something that she could, because that's a whole topic that I don't want to get into, but that grief from a twin is something that I can't understand. It's so deep that it's just beyond words. But everything else remains in his cupboards. And it's not ready. That we put it away. It's not on display. But here's another interesting one, and this is important for people who are going through any type of grief, losing any loved one. Some people find pictures to be therapeutic. They want to see the person's pictures, have them out on display in the home, memories, and to see it. And for other people, the picture, it's gut-wrenching because it speaks of who's not there. And there's no rules here again. It's one person wants it, and in our family, different needs. My wife has her needs, I has different needs, our other children have all got their own, where they are in terms of the pictures. I find it almost impossible to look at his picture. I mean, I still struggle looking at my dad's picture, because that emotion of love just knocks you off your feet. It's like, that's the person I adored, and they're not here. So the picture took a while. During the shiva, I just put his pictures down. I couldn't stand there and daven and have his picture on the window, so that was beyond something that I was capable of doing. Now the pictures are there. I don't gaze at them too intently, because I find that too difficult, but they're there. I see them, see his face. But others in their family need to look at them and need to feel that that picture's there. And again, it rules on what's right. It's very, you have to play it by each person, and you've got to remember, it's a cliche, but sometimes cliches are worthwhile. The person who's gone wants you to be happy, would want you to be functioning, and so you've got to also do what you need to do to and I think it's part of that experience. Spiritually, we're told that the soul is aware of how you're feeling. So if the connection's there, child and parent, it's a very strong connection. So if we were told that if we are in a sad place, that will resonate in the world of souls. Well, I can't explain that in words, and so to sort of balance our feelings and to try and if you're feeling sad, to feel sad, but then to try and do something positive. That's like a mitzvah or something good. That then is like they write about, it's like giving them a gift. It's like you're giving to them. And that, in terms of the Jewish teachings, that's a nice way of looking at it. There'll be times when you feel his presence. Sometimes on Shabbos I'll mention his name. I go to shul and I call one of my kids by his name because I said he was always next to my side. So shul is where we were. I sometimes wonder, is he there? Is he like? Am I more aware of him? Am I using his name because I don't know. I can't see, but I can't see the souls, but there's some spiritual thing happening, and I sometimes wonder, where you randomly just use his name for something that you weren't thinking about him, and it just comes out. Is he saying, Abba, I'm here right now, and I'm just telling you I love you. I'm okay, and you're okay, and whatever this relationship is now on a spiritual level is real, and I'm just saying hi. And sometimes we wonder, you get that smile.
I remember, like I said, I was in school with him, and then when he started to feel ill, not feel ill, but he went to hospital, the whole school changed. I remember Asher Arnold, a good friend of mine, he's a wonderful guy. He set up that like everyone should pray, and he set up weekly things, whatever it was, and the whole school changed the atmosphere, and then bit by bit it just continued, and then.
I think it shows what schools can do and what teenagers can do. You speak a lot about teenagers and their voice in politics and stuff. I definitely think society underestimates the capacity. We see when things go wrong. We see when teens or young adults do stupid things and then it's in the paper. We don't often promote the love and the caring and the empathy and the capacity. And when they came to me during the Shiva and said, can we organise a Torah scroll? That Torah scroll is tens of thousands of pounds. It wasn't something that I ever imagined would be something that... As a teacher in me, and sometimes I'm such a teacher, I thought to myself, these kids have got a fork in front of them. One side of that fork is their good friend has passed away. They could completely fall apart. They could go so dark and self-harming. And I was so terrified that some of these boys would go into a bad place of depression. But they're asking, can they do a Torah scroll? Put their energy into a positive project. And they did it. And it was so beautiful after Pesach, just before Pesach, when we dedicated it, and the procession in the street, and his friends from primary school, and they'd parted company, different high schools, and they came in the dancing, there was unity, and from across the schools and parts of the community, it just showed me that project was so beautiful, because it just showed, use the energy, they've got the energy to do, they're asking to do something that is life enhancing and life fulfilling. And they did it, and it showed one boy can touch, and the school can, and teenagers are capable of feeling and capable of
probably saved their life.
Yeah, I think so. Some of those boys, and it touched the school, and it's real. And the projects they did afterwards in a couple of years, it gave them something positive to do, and it shows the capacity of young people to use their energies in a positive way, and keep that the spirit of the person who's no longer here in a physical sense, the real person that was there alive on some level, and keep doing good things.
Yeah.
Any final questions?
I want to know, do you have any sort of inspiration for people that are dealing with grief? Just maybe a quick message, something like that.
Yeah, it's nice. I think to be kind to yourself. I think people can be very cruel to themselves. You have to love yourself. To give yourself space, no expectations. I don't think I can't demand from others to live life the way we're trying to. And I say trying because who knows? I told you that veil's very thin. And I'm acutely aware of the possibility of going one side of that or staying on the other side. And it takes tremendous amounts of effort. When you've been blessed, and I say it, blessed to have been a parent of a child, to be aware of a life that was so beautiful. It shows the capacity. And why do you mourn? You mourn because you miss the beauty of their existence. That life can be beautiful. And you've got responsibilities to other children, to other people. Take that seriously. You know, the world doesn't stop. And maybe it's okay to live in that strange place between grief and happiness, and to make peace with that complicated. That's okay. We know. Don't worry, be happy is great for a t-shirt, but it's not great as a motto for life. Because sometimes you don't have to be happy, and that's okay. Sometimes you can be happy, you can not be happy. You can cry, you can smile. All that mixture of emotions is totally fine. But I think there's one message that as a teacher, as a rabbi, as a Jew, that resonates from the Torah. The very first conversation God has with the first human beings is be fruitful and multiply. Or in other words, I, God, the creator of life, am telling you to create life. Later on, we have the midwives. The midwives are told by Pharaoh, kill the children. And the story ends, and they kept them alive. We have the commandment. You have to live with the mitzvahs. Third book of the Torah. V'chai b'hem. You have to live. Torah is not meant, you're not meant to kill yourself for Torah. Only 3 big sins, but the rest of it, you got to live. And then each book of the Torah, I think to me, that the Judaism says, live life, sanctify life, make life good. Can't always be good for yourself, but you can make life good for other people. Having a purpose, discovering how you can be there for others, I think is... And then by being there for others, you're ultimately being there for yourself as well. You're helping yourself. But life, to me, is one of the key words of Judaism. It's living life. It's not existing. Dragging your body through the streets and shop. It's living life. To live it to its fullest in the full array. And please God, those who are... There's a blessing, there's a prayer. Those who are struggling, whatever it is they're struggling with in life, should discover the capacity to live life. If people feel that they want to talk, then when this goes public, they're more than welcome to get in touch with me. You can get me through Holy Law, through King David High School.
We can put your contact details on the
details there.
Depends up to you.
Yeah, you can put an email address that people can get in touch via an email, and we can talk. You know, we can share. I can cry with people. We can cry together, cry separately, and enjoy life. And we can, live it. You've got to live. If you've got the gift of life, use it.
Love that, inspiring people to be similar.
Hope you enjoyed watching that video. Click here to subscribe, or click here to watch more of our videos.